Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. Loads and loads of love, and I hope that you're having a very, very lovely festive time of year, and you're doing a lot of celebrating and drinking fizzy champagne and eating lovely, delicious, delectable food, because that's what this time of year is all about. So loads of love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing well. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, the year was 1982. It had been freezing cold earlier on in the day, chilling bone to marrow. As high up in the mountains at over 7,200 feet, it could get terribly cold, with bitter blue sky, crisp snapping winds. But later on in the day, the temperature would invariably change just as quickly. You could be abandoning your heavy coat for some cool summer clothes just as easily. It was something we had got used to living in Estes Park, north central Colorado, but I never ever wearied of it. It was like the weather was a grumpy old man with a contrary personality, drifting from an icy mood to more sober, then to cheerful and sunny disposition, when the thin shafts of crystal sunlight would sparkle across the valley in a glorious golden glaze. My mother was driving back with me from a shopping trip in Denver, 70 miles from Estes Park, on the long, curved asphalt road that hugged many of the cliffs of the tumultuous angular terrain on the windy way back home, where some of the roads were like crooked fingers. I remember we'd been listening to Madonna's greatest hits. My mother loved Madonna, fancied herself as a little bit of a look-alike, with her chiselled cheekbones, inky blue eyes, straight nose, and very feminine jawline, along with her wide lips that were always painted with a bright red lipstick, not to mention her whiter-than-white porcelain fair skin. She even wore her bottle blonde hair in a Marilyn Monroe hairstyle. I was excited as my mother had spoilt me rotten on our shopping trip, as in our local town we didn't have the vast amount of shopping opportunities that you have in Denver. When we would paint the town red, buying lots of lovely clothes, she would always take me to the Milky Lane afterwards to have a double thick chocolate milkshake, as shopping is thirsty business, I can assure you of that. On this occasion she brought me a fluffy pink coat. I simply loved it. It was like a fox coat, only it was fake. Every young girl's perfect dream. My mother was tapping the steering wheel with her perfectly pink, long, lacquered nails, singing in time to Madonna's voice, "It's a cool, cool summer," in her flashy pink sports car, while the gusts of winds blew back our hair. She hit the gas pedal, pressing her feet a little too enthusiastically on the accelerator, where moments later, as if on cue, we were pulled over by the police, with sirens blazing and flashing blue lights. What was it this time? I sighed, as the officer walked over to the car with a grim look on his face. My mother adjusted her large sunglasses and peered at the officer flirtatiously through thick black false eyelashes. "Hello, officer," she said, turning up the charm on her voice like the volume of your remote control, her musical voice lifting in a cheeky, flirtatious drawl. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Ma'am, you've been speeding." "Oh, I'm so sorry, officer," she said, purring gently. "I didn't mean to. Will you let me off just this once?" "And who do we have here? Who is this lovely young lady?" asked the officer, peering in at me, giving me a bright, sunny smile. "This is my daughter." "Hello, officer," I said. "Hello, little girl. What's your name?" "Hazel." "Very nice name, Hazel. What do you think your husband would think of you driving so recklessly, ma'am? Especially with your daughter here in the front seat." "The name's Rachel," said my mother. "For the record, officer, I'm divorced." "I'll let you off just this once," said the officer, giving me a wink. "We'll let your mother off, shall we, Hazel?" I nodded. The officer scribbled his number on a piece of card, giving it to my mother. "Give me a call sometime, if you fancy a drink. And word of advice, don't speed again. It's not a very good idea." "Oh, you're a darling, officer. We'll do so." "The name is Angus." "You're a darling, Angus," said my mother, blowing him an exaggerated kiss with fingers on lips that had the poor man flushing a bright pink colour. It was always like that with my mother, a tireless flirt who had a long stream of male admirers. I knew she'd never be phoning that officer. She had a very jealous boyfriend, Julian, whom I couldn't stand. He was so possessive over her and acted like he owned her, as if she was a prized Afghan hound, and anyone who looked her way, well, there'd be hell to pay. "We need to do a spot of shopping," said my mother, pulling into the parking lot at the local store, quickly grabbing a shopping basket. "I've not got anything in the house tonight." My mother was a dreadful cook. She always bought ready-cooked food or stuff that was simple to throw together. I think she was just rarely lazy. If she put her mind to it, she probably could turn up something halfway decent. It suited her to plead impoverishment when it came to her culinary prowess, so that she could be taken out to some really trendy restaurants in Denver by her long list of swooning admirers. As my mother was walking around the shop, studying the shelves wilfully, throwing spaghetti, tomato sauce, French bread and Parmesan cheese into the basket, with me trudging by her side, I witnessed a man affably waving at me. I felt very shy and immediately grabbed my mother's hands, pointing bashfully towards the man, with childish, diffident hand gestures. "He keeps looking at me, Mummy." "Creep," said my mother, shaking her mane of blonde curls furiously. He was a tall man, with large shoulders and a short neck, with a beard of white hair, and piercing blue eyes that were almost as cold as ice. "I don't like the look of him," she whispered to me. "Did you see the way he was leering at you? You're only 7, for goodness sake. I ask you what the world is coming to when grown men ogle a little kid like you. The man is a complete pervert." "What does ogle mean, Mummy?" "Never you mind," said my mother, grabbing me protectively, pushing me towards the till to pay for our purchases. She looked up nervously towards the man, who was eyeballing us. He was pretending to examine the baked beans, but despite his very best efforts, he wasn't pulling off a very convincing act. If he wanted to improve his game, some acting lessons wouldn't go amiss. "He's not fooling anyone," my mother muttered angrily. "He's still gawking at us. Can you believe it? It makes my blood boil like Mount Vesuvius." "Hello, Mrs. DuPont. How are you today?" asked Abby, the girl behind the counter, who always spoke in such an upbeat tone of voice. People often asked her if she had ever had a sad day in her entire life. She was always smiling. I thought that was pathetic, as everyone alive has been sad at some point in time. She was a dumpy, doughy-looking girl, with a full head of short curly black hair, and a bright smile so sunny she could melt ice. Living in a small town, you tend to know most of the people. Abby was just one of the biggest hearts in the community. Helpful, polite, attentive, very cheerful. The sort of person you'd want to hang around if you were down in the dumps. She'd lift your mood in a heartbeat. "Have you seen him before?" my mother whispered to Abby. "You see that rubberneck over there, with the white beard, the heartless blue eyes, pretending to look at the baked beans? Do you know who he is?" "Can't say I do, Mrs. DuPont. Why? Is he giving you the evil eye?" "It's not me I'm concerned about. He keeps looking at Hazel with that hungry, carnivorous look. You know what I mean? His sort give me the heebie-jeebies." Abby nodded. "Some people are seriously sick, Mrs. DuPont." My mother grabbed the paper bags of shopping, hauling them quickly into the trunk. "Get into the car, Hazel. We're out of here pronto. Let's get moving," she said, putting her foot quickly on the gas pedal and backing the car out of the parking lot, with a flamboyant, rather sexy swerve. My mother always knew how to make grand entrances or exits, even if she was using an aluminium steel pink carcass to make an impression or achieve maximum effect. "Damn it," she said. "That bloody man is following us in his white truck. I can see it's him. Can you bloody believe it? What on earth is his problem?" she said, checking the man through her driver's mirror. The man trailed behind us, sticking to our pink backside like superglue. So my mother guilefully pulled over her swanky sports car to the side of the road, so that the man had absolutely no choice but to pass us by, which was a very good move on her part. "Hallelujah," she said. "The jerk has finally gone. That insidious man was following us. What the heck is his problem?" Our town is built on a large sprawling meadow. After our long day of shopping, I was itching to return home. I couldn't wait to model my brand new pink furry coat for my mother. Our rubber tyres crushed the pebbles down our short driveway, where we parked in the open carport, outside a very serene, dignified brown brick home, boasting wide expanses of glass, that opened out onto magnificent views of our backyard. In the far distance you could see the undulating rolling blue mountains dappling the horizon, along with the viridescent mixed deciduous coniferous forest beyond our home, that was spread out over a vast distance where trees clustered together like old men, some crooked and twisted from years of brutal storms. Within those woods was a plethora of wildlife. It wasn't uncommon for us to see bears rummaging across our lawn, wreaking havoc on the seed trays that we put out for the birds, or finding a couple of raccoons ferreting around in our dustbin. And in season, like so many locals in our part of the world, we'd been privy to seeing elk giving birth to their young, sometimes even in our own backyard. As I expected, no sooner had we arrived home, I could see Julian's motorbike parked in our driveway. The man was attired in a black tight leather pair of pants, with his custom-made black jacket. He got off his bike, lifting his oversized helmet off his head. He was a slim man with long, lanky legs, sleek black hair swept up in a funky hairstyle, a square jawline, and very muddy brown eyes that were deep-set and slitty, rather reminiscent of a bull terrier. I sighed. I hated it when my mother's boyfriend was around, as my mother flirted with him assiduously. I always had to relocate habitually to my bedroom to avoid becoming the embarrassing spare part. I was mindfully aware of the awkwardness of these expeditious romantic liaisons with my mother's amorous boyfriend, who had the explorative, inquiring hands of an octopus that were wandering everywhere, as if my mother was a road map. "How's your day been, Rachel?" he asked, giving her a big soppy wet kiss on her lips. I turned around in disgust. I hated seeing this man get sedulously all touchy-feely with my mother. "Well, it was good, until we went to the store. Some weirdo was gawking at Hazel in a very injudicious, inappropriate way. He had that awful look about him." "You're sure he wasn't looking at you?" said Julian, putting his arms around my mother. "Absolutely not. He was looking at Hazel." "If I'd seen him, I would have throttled him. The man must be seriously warped." "Mummy nearly got fined today," I piped, "but the policeman let her off. He gave her his card. He wants her to have drinks with him, doesn't he, Mummy?" Julian went green at the gills. "Does he now? Is this true, Rachel? Were you flirting with a copper?" "If needs must," said my mother, giving me a cheeky wink, while Julian had opened her handbag to uncover the card, which he wilfully shed into hundreds of pieces. See what I mean by jealous? I loved seeing the tension in his face when he got his feathers ruffled. He looked like a bull terrier that wanted to lash out. For some reason I liked turning up the heat, making the poor man sweat. The next morning, 2 of the neighbours' kids joined me to play hide-and-seek with them, Janice and her brother Edward, whom I would play with regularly. They were very nice kids. We hung around together most of the time. During the course of our game, I was hiding behind a tree, wearing my long white cotton socks framed by pretty frills and a velvety pink dress. I was giggling. As I was saying, I was about 7 years old at the time. My long blonde hair was tied up in pigtails with pink ribbons. It appeared that silly old Edward, who loved to complicate things, was looking in all the difficult, obscure places to find me, leaving behind the more straightforward areas. He was battling to find me. I found that highly amusing. It made me laugh. I always believed hiding in the simple places was so much easier. That was when I saw the strange man that I'd seen in the supermarket for a second time. He was hiding behind the tree, surreptitiously moving towards me, his tall body crouched over to make himself less conspicuous, possibly less intimidating and more approachable for me. I was surprised to see him. I knew my mother didn't like him at all. He put his fingers on his lips and went, "Shh, shh." He was creeping towards me, turning his full head of white hair to the left and right, furtively checking that no one else was around. He reminded me of my grandfather, with a white beard, penetrating, searing blue eyes. He spoke in a strange accent. "Hello, little girl. What is your name?" I put my finger in my mouth nervously, chewing my fingernails awkwardly. "My name's Hazel." "That's a very pretty name, Hazel, for a very pretty girl. My name is Stefan. I have a lovely present for you." He handed me a china doll. I gasped in astonishment. I'd always dreamed of a china doll. This was a beautiful doll with wide blue eyes, long curly auburn hair, dressed in a pretty pink dress lined with lace, and on her china leg she was wearing lacy pantaloons. She was absolutely gorgeous. I'd never seen such a bedazzling doll before. I stared at it, with blue eyes growing wide with wondrous awe. I'm friends with Father Christmas in the North Pole. Father Christmas says that Hazel has been a very good girl, that he wanted to send you a gift before Christmas. She is so very special, he says. Father Christmas told you to say that? I asked excitedly. Did he get the milk I left out for him last Christmas with the cinnamon cookies? Oh, yes, he did. He told me it was absolutely delicious. It's thirsty work climbing down chimneys, I assure you, Hazel. I looked at the china doll he handed me. She's so pretty. I'm going to call her Claudia, like my teacher at school. My teacher at school's called Claudia. She's ever so nice. She's also got auburn hair. She's very pretty, like you, Hazel. But you must not tell anyone about this present. Other children will be very upset if they don't get one. You must not let your mummy see it. She might get very angry with Father Christmas for giving you an early present. I nodded. The man mysteriously disappeared. I simply couldn't wait to show my friends my bedazzling china doll. Janice was exceedingly jealous. She looked like she was going to burst into tears any minute, as she felt left out. But Edward wrinkled up his nose in disgust and said, It's a china doll, not very nice. Where did you get it? They both asked me. I found it, I lied, under that tree over there. I didn't want to betray Father Christmas' trust, after all. Which tree? Asked Janice. Help me look. Maybe we can find one for me as well. As you can imagine, I thought I was very special getting a china doll, until I found other friends my age had also been given china dolls randomly by a stranger. Katie Perkins told me that while she was playing on her bicycle outside her home, a man had stopped in his truck, called her over to his window. He had asked her what her name was. It's Katie Perkins, she told him. Oh, he had said, I have a special delivery for Katie Perkins from the North Pole. Father Christmas forgot to deliver you this extra present last year. He apologizes profusely for the delay. I'm his helper. My name is Stefan. Katie had been so excited, she told me how special she felt about getting the china doll, as Father Christmas had singled her out for favour. I didn't tell her about mine, but I was beginning to feel significantly less special. Then my friend Gretchen Montague also received a china doll outside the school gate, when her mother was about to collect her from school. Once again it was given to her by a strange man called Stefan, with a similar story. I was beginning to think that Father Christmas was favouring everyone with china dolls. It really upset me greatly. I didn't feel quite so special anymore. One day when I was playing in the yard, I saw Stefan again. He indicated for me to come over to him. This time he gave me a big bag of sweets, compliments of Father Christmas. I took them away happily from him. I thought nothing of it, only that Father Christmas had become very active in our lives, at times which were strange. Wasn't he supposed to be busy after all in the North Pole, preparing stockings for kids all over the world for Christmas? I hardly thought he'd have the time to give other kids presents during the summer. One day as my mother was cleaning out my bedroom, she stumbled across my china doll. Who gave this to you? She asked, looking surprised. I don't remember anyone buying this for you. I flushed a bright pink colour. I wasn't good at lying to my mother. She looked at me stiffly. I don't like it when you hesitate, Hazel. It means you're hiding something from me. You need to tell me right now. Who gave this to you? She demanded. I trembled, my skin flushing. The man you don't like. The one with the white beard. Which man? My mother asked me. Who are you talking about, Hazel? The man we saw at the grocery shop. After we'd been shopping in Denver, when you were nearly fined by the policeman. The nice officer that gave you his phone number. My mother grabbed me, holding me tightly like a doll that she was afraid to let go of. I could feel her whole body trembling. She looked directly into my eyes with an earnest look. This is very important, Hazel. I need you to listen to me, and listen to me hard. When did this man give you the doll? About a day after the trip to Denver, when I was playing hide and seek with the neighbours. He whispered to me. He told me not to tell anyone. The doll actually comes from Father Christmas in the North Pole. He helps Santa Claus. His name's Stefan." "Listen, Hazel," said my mother, grabbing me. "You know Mummy doesn't like the man with the white beard." I nodded. "I know, you told me you didn't like him." "Well, that's because he's not a nice man. He's not telling you the truth, Hazel. He's not Father Christmas's helper. Not at all. He's lying to you. He's not a good man. If you ever see him again, you mustn't go anywhere near him. Promise me that. You can't take anything from him. Do you understand?" I nodded. "But he's given a china doll to my 2 other friends, Katie Perkins and Gretchen. They both told me they got a doll from Father Christmas as well." The next day my mother had invited the sheriff over to our home, along with the 2 mothers who had children that were given china dolls by the strange man called Stefan. My mother's account. I was terribly worried about Hazel having received a china doll from that creepy, duplicitous man that I'd seen at the grocery store that day. I'll never forget those icy blue eyes that were shark-like in their dispassion, but predatory at the same time, as they eyed my daughter with a lascivious look which was very scary for a mother of a 7-year-old girl. As a single mother, I couldn't keep my eye on my daughter 24/7. Living in a small mountain town with a congenial community where we're on friendly terms with our neighbours, it was absolutely terrifying to think that we might have a predator in our midst. The trouble is that we live close to the Rocky Mountain National Park. We're a gateway to a lot of tourists who stay often in our small town or in the town of Boulder. So we get people here from all parts of the world passing through. So a stranger could be posing as a tourist with a nefarious agenda. I couldn't believe that it was a coincidence that all 3 kids given the china dolls had blonde hair and blue eyes. Yes, you could say a friendly old man who likes cute little girls was just giving them china dolls. I don't buy that for a moment. What's wrong with that? Everything's wrong with that. You see, I've seen the man myself. I've observed his amorous demeanour. I consider myself a good judge of character. My maternal instincts were in overdrive. I instinctively sensed something was terribly wrong. Of course, I went to see the sheriff straight away. He agreed with me that something was seriously off. I was asked to give the police a description of the man, which was drawn up by a police artist, and the police informed me that they would be keeping an eye out for the dubious character, hoping that they would spot him any time soon. Ostensibly, both mothers whose kids had received china dolls were as panicked as me when they learnt the truth, when I told them all about the leering stranger that I'd seen at the store. In truth, they took the news really rather badly. They were terrified to even let their kids out of their sight, and Gretchen's mother insisted on schooling her child at home. I thought that was a little extreme, but then of course I had no idea what this terrible man called Stefan was actually capable of. Hazel's story again. It was a Tuesday night. I glanced out of the window to see a glistening full moon and clusters of silvery stars. I loved full moons as the night was so light at times like this. You could see in the dark more clearly. My mother had finished her relationship with her biker boyfriend Julian, so I was thrilled to have her undivided attention to myself. In truth, I think part of the reason she'd ended things with him was because she wanted to focus entirely on me. She was exceedingly worried about the man who had given me the china doll. It was consuming her life. She didn't believe for a moment that he could be trusted, so she had become exceedingly protective towards me. She'd even brought her own handgun to protect us, which was a big deal for my mother, as she loathed and despised guns of any sort. She believed the disadvantages of having a gun was that it could end up being used against you, but it was a risk that she was willing to take on my account. My mother sat on the bed, brushing my long mane of blonde hair, until it shone. "I love your hair," she said, nuzzling her nose against my locks appreciatively, as she took in a big whiff. "It smells exactly like that apple shampoo." She asked me to open my mouth so she could examine my teeth, to see if I'd brushed them correctly. And once she was fully satisfied, she checked my nails to make absolutely certain there was no dirt caught up behind them, as spending a plethora of time out of doors, playing in the dirt, dust and earth, meant my nails were inclined to get rather filthy. She opened a book and began to read it to me. I'm not sure what the story was about, but I always enjoyed hearing my mother read, as her voice was as soothing and reassuring as the sound of the ocean waves crashing against the rock, or rain pelting down upon the roof. I closed my eyes. My eyelids grew heavy as I fought back a yawn. "A little more, Mummy," I begged, even though I'd lost the gist of the story. And like a boat sailing out at sea, I was drifting off to the world of my dreams. "Sorry, sweetheart, but it's beddy-byes now. You need to get some shut-eye," she said, kissing me tenderly on both cheeks and getting up to close the curtains. She glanced out of the windows. "Oh, it's a bright night tonight, isn't it? There's a full moon out there." I didn't hear her comments. I was fast asleep. My mother's account. I was awoken in the middle of the night to this unfamiliar rustling sound that grabbed my attention immediately, as it was a sound that was completely out of place to my ears. I wasn't certain what it was, so I swiftly put on my slippers, tiptoeing down our entrance hall very, very quietly. I could see a pulsing light coming from my daughter's bedroom. It was flickering on and off, like a torch, its beams sometimes dappling an area of my daughter's bedroom wall. There was a rank medical smell in the air, one I wasn't well acquainted with, that rather reminded me of hospitals. That was when I saw the shadowy dark silhouette of a man who was carrying my sleeping daughter in his arms. I couldn't believe it. It was all I could do not to scream at the top of my lungs, but I wisely held my tongue, for I didn't want this man to know that I'd seen him. There are no words to describe a mother's dismay when you're witnessing your own child's abduction, for the scene unfolding before my eyes seemed surreal. I thought for a moment that I had to be dreaming. A chill descended over my body, as a numbing coldness swept over me like a deep Antarctic freeze, while a thick foggy curtain of bitter nausea transcended at the back of my throat. I had to stop him, but I didn't have my gun with me. What was I to do? I began to physically panic, as my mind was whirling with a kaleidoscope of thoughts that I tried to grab, but they eluded me like a bird on the wind. I couldn't even think straight. I was as jumpy as a Springer Spaniel, as disorientated as a confused pigeon. I quickly tiptoed back to the bedroom to get my gun, my fingers trembling as I held the cold metal in my hand and felt the hefty weight of the gun. Was I really going to do this? I tiptoed along the passageway, following the flickering light of the torch. I could see the man had managed to prise open the back door, possibly using a skeleton key. I couldn't be sure. I now wished I'd stepped up security measures in my home, like Gretchen's wise mother had done, as buying a gun had not been enough. I didn't trust myself in being able to use it effectively, but I had no choice in the matter. I'd have to use it to get my daughter back from this man. I could not shilly-shally around by calling the police. That would be wasting time. I had absolutely no time to lose. Time was of the essence. It was vital. I needed to shoot this man, and shoot him now. I needed to do it quickly, with the benefit of not even being seen. I could see he was armed with a fierce revolver that was clasped in his hand, while he was still carrying my daughter. It made my gun look like a kiddie's toy. Shoot him, my mind was screaming. But he was carrying my daughter. What if I accidentally shot her by mistake? Or my bullet ricocheted? I wasn't even a good shot. I could see he was stumbling towards the woods, carrying my sleeping daughter in his arms, who looked completely drugged. I knew why he was accessing this route. He was taking cautious measures not to be seen. There was a hiking trail behind our home that led to a remote back road. He was covering his tracks to ensure he was not observed. It was cunning and very clever. I ran after him quietly in my white nightdress, with my slippers, trying to be as discreet as I possibly could. There was a gentle wind blowing, lifting my hair annoyingly into my eyes, while my nightdress blew backwards and forwards like a large white boat sail on a stormy, tempestuous sea. The mixed variety of trees, from Douglas firs to spruces, oaks and chokecherries, moved their limbs in the wind like angry fists hammering the night sky. The woodgrove seemed menacing. The normal sounds of the night had been confiscated by the hostile ambience that demanded that the cheerful sounds that bring us reassurance could not be played. So the crickets, frogs, and even the sounds of a distant coyote had been vanquished from this evening's scheduled chorus. The trees swaggered in the breeze like drunken sailors, while the soft beams of moonlight filtered through the forest canopy, something that I was ever grateful for, as it helped me to see where I was going. I ran up behind the stranger cautiously, my heart thundering in my ears, my eyes almost choking with tears. My heart felt as if it had been squeezed tightly by a powerful fist. I was so utterly filled with terror. I could barely breathe. I was going to have to shoot this man, but the idea of pulling the trigger terrified the life out of me. But I would do anything in the world to save my child, even if it meant shooting this man at point-blank range, burying him under the forest floor. I would do absolutely anything to save my kid. Anything, even if it was outside the law. This was self-defense, surely. That was when I suddenly saw the anomalous creature gliding through the trees, the likes of such that I've never seen before. She stopped for a moment as she saw me, noting the anguished expression upon my face. I'm in no doubt she could sense my terror. She seemed to have tuned in to my frequency, appeared to be on high alert, like a dog whose ears have pricked up to a strange sound. I had absolutely no idea who or what she was, but she looked at me with a vigilant, circumspect, deep-set pair of dark eyes that were razor-sharp and heedful like a centurion on duty. It was all I could do to point at the man running ahead of me with a desperate, pleading expression upon my face. In my mind, I was begging the creature to help me. If anyone could help me, it was her. She was powerful, big, lofty, majestic, courageous, very, very strong. About 8 foot tall, 700 pounds, built like an army tank. What more could I ask for to help me? The creature's body stiffened, her jaw tightened, as her dark, prudent eyes fixed on the man. She then glided towards him with the efficient speed and grace of a cheetah. The man turned around as he heard the ground thundering behind him, as the horrifying, discomposing sound of a deep, low, guttural growl filtered through the valley. The creature pulled back her lips until her growl turned into a pugnacious, bellicose roar. The man's eyes grew round with terror. His fingers started to twitch awkwardly. He tried to access the trigger of his gun. The intransigent creature pushed back the man. He rolled on his back with my daughter on top of him. She gently pushed my daughter to one side. Then she sat on the man, pressing her powerful buttocks upon his chest. She began bouncing on him like a deflating rubber beach ball. As ribs cracked, the air was expunged from his lungs. He groaned. Then it was over for him, as a few more heavy pounding bounces from this powerful creature was equivalent to a bulldozer running over him, or a very powerful pestle crushing spices in a mortar. He lay there on the ground, his life now extinct, while a white substance drooled down his chin. His eyes were glazed over like a dead fish. I recognized the man instantly. It was the man with the full white beard, who had been ogling my daughter at the grocery store. I ran hurriedly towards my daughter. She was fast asleep, wrapped up in a blanket. I noticed that there was a strange alcoholic stench on her breath. She had clearly been drugged. I looked up at the creature who ran to my side, examining my daughter's forehead with her hand, seemingly satisfied that my daughter was breathing, although she reacted adversely to the strange smell on my daughter's breath, with a rather bewildered look upon her face. For a moment she stood still. She looked at me through her deep-set dark eyes that were so kind and gentle. She pointed to my daughter, and then to herself, and lifted up her 2 fingers. "You have 2 of your own?" I said. The creature nodded. She looked very proud. I studied her for a moment. She was like a giant human being covered in long, flowing dark hair, but her face was incredibly feminine and human-like, her skin leathery, her cheekbones so pronounced you could cut glass on them, and her nose flat. I noticed her breasts were large and full. In that moment, the 2 of us connected on a very deep spiritual level, as 2 mothers who truly understood how much we love our children. The creature picked up my daughter for me, as if she was as light as a feather, and seamlessly carried her towards my home. And I opened up the kitchen door and guided the creature into my daughter's bedroom, pointing to the bed. She placed my sleeping child in her bed, and I ran into her arms and gave her a hug. "Thank you," I said, my wet tears now dampening the creature's hair. I noticed she smelt deliciously of petrichor, the earth after it rains, one of my all-time favourite smells. I felt so tiny and fragile in her arms, like a china doll. The creature seemed surprised but pleased by my effusive display of gratitude. She patted my back tenderly. Finally she moved through the bedroom, ambling gracefully down the passageway with me following behind her. She stopped for a moment to examine my large purple amethyst on the hallway table. She ran her hands over it with an expression of awe on her face, as if to say, "Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful." I didn't hesitate to hand it to her. It was a huge stone, but in her hands it looked quite small. The creature's face lit up with such joy. She let out a thrilled whoop, and then I watched her as she glided out of my kitchen through the backyard into the wood grove, carrying the precious gem. I thought it was interesting how her eyes were in awe of a natural wonder of nature, and not any of the material stuff we tend to accumulate. I decided to let sleeping dogs lie. After all, what else could I do? I didn't know how on earth I would explain the dead body in the woods to the police, so I said nothing about it at all, as I wanted to protect the strange creature that had rescued my daughter from any kind of harm that I now know is a Bigfoot. The police contacted me, informing me that the foreign man whom had been grooming my daughter by giving her a china doll had been found dead in the wood grove behind my property, having been trampled by a very powerful wild animal, possibly a bear. "You are very lucky, ma'am. I think he was planning to abduct your daughter last night. His truck was found on the remote dirt road. It was discovered that he was an Eastern European tourist who's been renting out a house in the area, and it was found that he had drawers in his home full of inappropriate, obscene material concerning kids, and hundreds of china dolls. Not a good man by any manner of means. I'm glad to tell you that my daughter has no recall of this event. I chose to keep my lips sealed about what really happened that night, and of course my unlikely meeting with a spectacular, anomalous creature I now know to be a Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.